Welcome back. Well, we're happy to have with us tonight the President and Chief Executive Officer of the United Way of Washington County, Gwen Rogers. Gwen, welcome. We appreciate you coming.
Glad to be here.
So we invited you because we want to get an update on the United Way. I know there's an event coming up, a volunteer fair, and I hope we could talk about that and then some more general topics. So what can you tell us about the volunteer fair?
Well, first let me say that United Way does a lot more than just raise money to give to organizations in the community. One of the things that we really try to work on is other resources, and volunteerism is one of those. We know that a lot of organizations have difficulty finding volunteers, and we also know that there's a lot of people who are looking for things to do. They have spare time and they have skills that they want to put to use in the community. And so we offer a number of opportunities to bring those folks together. And one is the first ever Washington County Volunteer Fair that we're having on April 10th. And it's in cooperation with a number of different organizations, but we put it together with CASA and with the Community Foundation of Washington County. And so we're hoping it'll be very successful, and we believe very strongly that it will be.
Tell me what I would expect going to the volunteer fair. Who's going to be there? What are the opportunities that I'll be presented with?
I actually don't have the list of all the organizations that are going to be there, but we're expecting quite a few. And there'll be some classes there on how to be a good volunteer and some other things, some food, some activities for kids, those kinds of things. And if nothing else, just a good chance to learn about the different organizations that are out there in the community.
Okay.
Gwen, you said this is the first time a volunteer fair is happening by the Washington County United Way.
Yes.
Is this something that you've done in the past with other organizations you've been with, or do other United Ways around us have a volunteer fair that we're just trying to complement and copy off of?
There are, in different locations throughout the country, different communities have done this. Some have been led by United Way, some have been led by other organizations. It's something that my staff and I talked about a year ago that we thought would be an interesting thing to do. There had been some discussion about doing it a few years ago, and it just came together that these three organizations said all at the same time, let's give it a shot and put it together. And we're going to be doing it at the atrium at Robinwood Professional Center, so there's a lot of room to park, a lot of places to walk through. And since it's at the center of that facility, it's going to be easy to find.
Right.
When over the years, United Way has been a part of the fabric of Washington County. Mm-hmm. At what point do you see, or have you already reinvented yourself as time goes on? Firemen can't find volunteer firemen. Rescue can't find volunteer rescue. Mm-hmm. Rotary gets into things and they look for, everybody's looking for volunteers. Mm-hmm. What sets the United Way apart from everybody else, and what have you done to really change that image of years and years ago, because those corporate giants that used to be here aren't here anymore.
Right.
So you've got to do harder work and more work on your own.
Yes. And you ask about 8 different questions there, but I will do my best to answer them. United Way, like any organization that's responsive to the community, tries to be just that. We take a pulse of the community, we see what's going on, and try to be responsive to that, because we see ourselves as kind of the glue that holds together volunteerism for one part of it, financial support for some organizations, and bringing the business world into the nonprofit and charity world all at the same time. As I said, we're trying to be more than just a funder. We're trying to be a resource provider as well. When did this happen? Really, it's been evolving over time. The United Way Workplace campaign didn't just appear when United Way was a community chest. It was started at an organization, I believe in Ohio, in the 1950s, and then grew from that. And it became the anchor, the root from which United Way evolved over time again. And then now that's changed. Not so much because those companies aren't here, but overall because the workplace has changed. People have changed. Their interests have changed. How they work in the community has changed. And to be honest, we've been a little slow in responding to that. And we're trying to make that change now, and this is a part of that. But we're also trying to reach back to some of the businesses that we've been involved with in the past and say, we want to figure out how to work with you. We want to figure out how we can work with your employees to help them support the organizations that they want to support, to help you as a business be able to have corporate responsibility in the community so that you're working with company or organizations that will meet what you're trying to do in the community as well. And so we're trying to be a clearinghouse. We're trying to be a connecting point. We have a website where organizations can put what their volunteer needs are, and people who are interested in volunteering can go to that site and figure out what it is that they want to do. Not only can they be matched together, but this site actually makes it possible for the organization to manage all of their volunteer activities through that site.
And that exists today?
Yes.
And is there a special, do you get to that from the United Way website?
You can get to it from the United Way website, or you can get to it directly through volunteer.unitedway. I gotta remember now.
United Way Wash County?
That's the best way to get to
Okay.
it. Yeah, unitedwaywashcounty.org.
So, from a volunteer perspective, it strikes me, and I was involved in the United Way in my early career. I had a president and CEO of the bank that I worked for that was very committed, and he said, "Guess what, Jim? You're going to do this." And I said, "Okay, boss, I'm going to do this." My point is this: United Way has always had a lot of volunteers within its infrastructure because you have a very, very, very small staff.
Yes.
So can you outline for us what roles those volunteers play within the United Way, the volunteers at your organization level? What are they involved in? What do they do for your organization?
United, we're actually working on that ourselves. When a charity has employees, it's natural for that organization to depend on those employees a great deal, and then they become overstressed and overworked. And we've had that issue ourselves. And one of the things that I've tried to do in the little over a year that I've been here is get our folks to realize that volunteers will help us. Volunteers will leverage what we can do. I can do more with 3 volunteers helping me out than I can ever do by myself. And so one of the ways that we're looking at using volunteers is in coordinating data that we collect, in helping us with our administrative activities, because that's a lot of what we do, is we're not a service provider. We don't have clients. We don't provide assistance to people directly. We work with other organizations, and we try to help those organizations be the best that they can be. And so as a result, right now we don't use volunteers a lot. We have a lot of committee work that they work on, and we have our board of directors. And that's how we use volunteers.
And from the management perspective as a follow-up, So for example, funding priorities and who gets funded, is that a staff decision? Is that a volunteer decision? Who's making those types of decisions?
It's all volunteers.
Okay, so the funds that people are giving to the United Way, which are distributed, as I understand it, to specific programs, and the outcome of those programs are measured to make sure that they meet the goals. Those decisions are not made by staff, they're made by volunteers.
They are made by volunteers. What the staff does is provide the tools for volunteers and for organizations to work together to make that happen. So we'll teach an organization how to complete an application for a grant. We'll teach that organization how to do their quarterly reports as quickly and easily as possible and get that back to us. But all of those grant applications are reviewed by volunteers.
Is that a grant application to you or to someone else?
To us. To us. And so that goes to United Way. It is locally, and that is then reviewed by a group of volunteers who then make recommendations to our executive committee, who then determines whether to give that their stamp of approval, and then it goes to our board of directors for final approval. And then once those funds are distributed, those organizations have committed to us for 3 years what their goals are. And we ask them, let us know, how are you doing? Once every quarter, are you working towards those goals? Show us how that's happening. And it may be that, that what they're trying to do may not happen on a regular basis. It may take 6 months, 9 months. It may only happen in around the last quarter of the year. That's fine. We take that into consideration. But volunteers do all of that review. Volunteers make the decision if there's a problem or not. And then our staff, if there is a problem, if an organization is not meeting the goals that they have out there, we try to work with them to help them through that process. What can we do to make that work for you?
So essentially, this volunteer organization, if I give $1 to the United Way, that dollar is managed by volunteers, not by the staff, to go to the places that I would hope it would go and that does the most good. Interesting.
It's truly a community effort.
So United Way really is a community facilitator in that they network with other community needs, and they help with both some funding, but also help guide and direct what those local nonprofits are. So where do you see the needs as we move forward? Obviously volunteers is a big thing because fewer and fewer organizations seem to struggle to try to recruit. Ron alluded to that earlier. How can we get the word out? How can we try to, is it an ask? Is it a phone call to get more people to step up and volunteer for you?
It is trying to share with people people who read the paper, people who watch TV, people, any way that we can communicate. Social media is huge in letting people know what's going on in the community. And so we use that as well. One of the things that we do is we have what we call community conversations. We just had one in Smithsburg, and we had about 40 people show up on I think it was a Saturday afternoon at the library there, and it was coordinated by volunteers who we got food for them. We sat down as staff. We listened. The volunteers kept things going. They were the facilitators, and we listened to that, and we learned what's going on in that community and what their interests are. Last year, we had one in downtown Hagerstown, shut down one of the streets downtown in front of the library, and had this big, long table, and people sat and ate, and it was a good time, and we learned a lot. We're having one on March 30th in I'm going to be terrible at this, Hancock and out in Clear Spring and out in that way. And then we're having another one in Williamsport, I believe. And our hope is to have these all over the county, and it works with having the library as a partner and working with us is great because they have facilities, they have folks who want to volunteer as well. And so that's another way that we do that. Again, volunteers are the key, and the community is key.
What type of problem could somebody from Smithsburg or Hancock or Clear Spring bring to you as an example that you could help with?
Well, for instance, what in the case of Smithsburg, a big issue for folks there was police presence, county responsiveness to their issues in their community. And so we may not work directly on that issue, but we can share that information with the folks who, at the county, who would be willing to listen.
That would be the advocate part of give, advocate, volunteer.
Exactly. And so it's not always going to be that we're going to address an issue, but we can maybe get the information and get people connected who can make a difference on those issues.
And it also gives you that community pulse that you talked about earlier, so that where there are things that you could be potentially impact, you have that information. Great.
And so what it really comes down to is we're trying to be a multiplier. When somebody gives us $1, you give us $1, you give us $1, you give us $1, you give us $1. That now becomes $5 rather than $1 that goes towards a particular issue in the community. $1 is great. Supporting one organization is great. But if we can look at an issue and bring together 3, 4, 5, 8 organizations to address a specific issue, like kids after school programs, what are kids doing to keep themselves out of trouble? Things like financial literacy. We have a program where we have 6 organizations and a bank all working together to help folks learn about finance and banking and how to balance a checkbook and those kinds of things. And we can do a lot more together that way.
Yeah.
But it's okay to still give money directly to organizations as well.
So I will tell you that in my history, the thing that really sold me on United Way was the fact that, and I preface this by saying, and we probably all get calls every day from, will you give to this, will you give to that? And we don't have time, we don't have the energy to vet those organizations. And what has always impressed me about the United Way, and now even more so knowing it's the volunteers that actually vet these programs and these organizations and assure that the dollar I'm providing is being best used. So in my mind, that's a huge benefit to those who do want to give, and makes you the perfect place to give, makes United Way the perfect place to give, whether that is time or money or whatever the case may be. I'm going to take the last word on that. Gwen, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. When we come back, Fast Five, stay tuned. We'll have that on the other side of the break.